was 3 attendees.
So is Karen coming?
I just texted her. I thought she
Oh,
was.
okay.
She
Yeah.
just told me to remind her whenever.
I'll see if I've got Fred's data
I
here.
have a number, an 860 number, but it just says Fred, so I'm not sure it's Fred Hartwell.
Okay, let
Yeah,
me just check.
I thought everyone was attending too, but
I don't have Fred's number. I've got a
Hey, do you
CompuServe
happen to
email
have that list
address.
handy from the full board? I couldn't find it in my email.
I think we
yeah,
should get each other's numbers. This is, we're always in this position of having to prod people to show up.
yeah,
Oh, wait, I found it. I found it.
What is it if
No,
you
his number is not, that's not that Fred. Okay. Let me text Fred right now.
text his email, you mean?
No, I found his phone number.
Oh, when you've done that, tell me what it is and I'll.
Sure.
yeah. 'Cause you guys received reminders, right, from the
Yeah,
Zoom or
yeah,
from the
yeah.
Oh,
email?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, always. It's very clear to me where we're meeting.
Yeah, I
And
could
if I'm
set
not
more.
going to show up, I'll tell you.
I can set more reminders. You guys want to get more
No,
emails?
I don't
So
need
Bruce,
them.
I can tell you Fred's number if you want it.
Yes.
We're public.
413.
We're public, so I don't know if I would.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I'll email you, Bruce.
yeah.
Just use fingers.
So that's not either of them in the attendees, I guess, I assume.
No, there's 3
Okay.
attendees, but it's not anyone else
Oh,
from
that
the
was
subcommittee.
very witful of you, Nate.
But yeah,
Yeah.
back to that, what we're talking about, Bruce and Jesse, like having these different unit configurations, some of it would be, could we, if we wanted to allow that, would we have, affordability requirements or owner occupancy requirements? So you can only do those kinds of developments if you had, some of these conditions, because I agree. I think that it's hard to say, let's allow it everywhere. And then, I think we're going to get one outcome and not,
Yes, I mean, I read that text that came in very large letters from somebody that basically
oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I saw that.
echoed Doug's. And Doug and I had coffee on Saturday. We talked about a bunch of things. We did it in North Amherst, so so he's a little more familiar with North Amherst than he was vis-a-vis the Mill District. He'd never been there before. But his concern is, as he said so in the last meeting, he doesn't want to stand in. He doesn't want to limit density.
Yeah.
And I said, well, neither do I in principle. But I said that's why I put this population of Amherst table I did is really a part of this Amherst unique argument that I've offered to support. And I wanted to, and as you know, Pam Rooney and Jennifer Tarver have been responding, and one or other of them said, well, this table helps us. He said, I've got a 42% of the population are, permanent residents. And Pam said, I think, or Jennifer said, yeah, well, that means that 60% are not transitory. And she said she thought that was the more powerful way of expressing the same piece of data. And so that along with the average age piece, which I think those two numbers are the two numbers that I think we recognize that are basically the seemingly indisputable data points that show the uniqueness of the town.
Sorry to interrupt, Bruce. So there are 3 attendees, Eric
Oh.
Morgan, Jenna McGowan, and Ted. I don't know. I'm not sure what we want to do here, because we're not just, so you attendees, we're not in meeting yet because we don't have quorum. So we're just chatting. But I wanted.
Wasn't this what we did last time?
Yes.
And then people, oh shit, I forgot, and show up and
yeah, I mean, I think I've sent a number of emails.
Yeah, I don't know what the problem is. It's a little frustrating. But
Yeah,
of course it is. I mean, good Lord.
I mean, yeah, there's been different philosophies over time. Like, we could meet, basically take minutes as if it was a meeting, or we don't do anything. We just end it.
Well, but I thought we couldn't have a meeting if we don't have quorum.
We can't make decisions.
You can't make decisions. We could call it we call it like a sub-quorum meeting, and
we can We can
Okay,
meet just as Doug and I met at the
so I'm going
Futura on
back to
Saturday.
my,
There's just two of us.
I think I asked you this, Nate. What if we make, like, if we make the subcommittee just 3 official people, me and Bruce and Karen,
Right.
then we're good to go with just
Right.
2 of us, right?
Right. Yes.
So I think
Yep.
we should do that because it seems like Bruce, you and I are pretty reliable to show up. And then we can at least have an official meeting.
If
If
one
Fred,
or
of
other
course,
of the
can join
others.
or whoever can join, right?
Right. Yeah.
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 All right. I'm gonna propose we do that next time we actually have a meeting.
Yeah.
Meeting of the planning board or a meeting of the subcommittee?
Oh, yeah. Does the
Neither,
planning board have to approve
neither
that?
of us do
I think the planning board, we could bring it up
Okay.
in the
Maybe we
next
could
meeting
put,
too.
yeah,
Yeah.
maybe we can put on the agenda for Wednesday,
that. Yeah.
just to make this a little more efficient. Okay, so then you're saying we can start the meeting, still make minutes, just not vote on anything and not.
Yeah. I mean, it had been the practice. It's been discouraged. I mean, some committees do it, some don't. I feel like there's,
But hold on. I mean, here we have Jesse and me. It's exactly the same as Doug and I
Oh,
meeting at
great.
Futura on
Here's
Saturday.
Fred.
We don't even have to put a
Hey, Fred.
48-hour notice out.
Yeah,
right. Right.
yeah, correct. Hi, Fred. Thanks for jumping on. I know you gotta go at noon, right? Or by noon, and that's fine. So let's officially start the meeting, Nate, and
Sure.
whenever Fred has to go, we'll just close officially.
Fred is Fred had an errand in Westfield, and on my way southbound, I discovered an unbroken line of traffic northbound on 91 for 12 miles.
Hmm.
So I knew I had to come back from Westfield a different way. So anyway, here I am.
Great, no worries.
Okay.
We're recording, so I
Yep.
guess we're officially opening planning board subcommittee meeting Wednesday, February 26th. It's 11:10 a.m. What else I need to say? I guess we'll have a roll call attendance. I'll call your name. You can indicate if you're here or not. Bruce Coldham,
I'm here.
Fred Hartwell,
Fred is here.
Jesse Major, here. Just for everyone's information, we have in the attendees Eric Mongan, Janet McGowan, and Ted. For attendees, please raise your hand if you'd like to join the conversation. Okay, first agenda item, did you two have a chance to look at any of the minutes that I had prepared?
Oh, I think I did, but that was a long time ago.
Yes, were there?
Before the meeting, but I think I was the only one who had, and then I haven't relooked at them, so
Okay.
I think I'm good.
Fred, do you have thoughts on maybe approving some minutes or gonna wait
Yeah,
again?
no, I was good with what you presented. Thank you.
Okay,
Okay, so move to approve minutes as presented.
okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sets of minutes. So I guess I need a second. Bruce made the motion. Am I allowed to second?
Sure.
Okay,
I'll
I second
second
the
it.
motion. Okay, great. 2 seconds. Any other discussion? Okay, well,
That was a vote in favor.
okay. Bruce is aye. Fred? Aye.
Aye.
I'm also an aye. So we will approve all those minutes. I'll move, I now have a folder of approved minutes, Nate. I think I shared with you, so I'll put them all in there, and whenever we get a site for posting,
Yep.
slide up there.
Okay.
I'll try and prepare the last 2 meetings soon also for us to review. Great. That feels like a long-awaited progress, even though it's silly.
Well done.
All right.
Congratulations, Jesse.
Let me just find the agenda. I lost it. There it is. Footnote M. Do we need to discuss further? It was left over from last time, so it's
I
moving.
don't think so. We've
Yeah.
moved it forward. I mean, we did have a public comment, and I think it's a public comment that in principle, if we were any other town, we would agree with.
Yeah.
It's just that we are conflicted by the fact that 4 out of 5 anybody coming into town is a student, and in these neighborhoods where neighborliness, and this is your thing, Jesse, you've been so good at expressing the point, but I'll try too, that we value stability. We value vibrant, neighborly, and that does not happen if you have a high degree of transience, and that's what student accommodation is. So we are, as a board, I think, moving towards the idea that we should be discriminating about where we put students for their benefit, because it's more convenient if we can find places proximate to the university and the campus. There's a survey declaration that says that students would prefer to live on or near campus. That is not something that's controversial. So our situation is we are concerned about increasing density in these parts of town because of that. And so it's not that we are a normal Massachusetts town, we don't think. And we have data that suggests that supports that proposition.
Yeah. Fred?
Yeah, I completely agree, and I would add to that it's not like the planning board and the town of Amherst are sitting on their hands regarding the creation of housing. This board has done an enormous amount of work and expects to continue to do more work in terms of the U Drive overlay, which is largely focused on housing, and also with the fact that we're now looking at overlays on in other areas of town. It's not like we are in any way reluctant to do actually rather ambitious things in the area of creation of housing.
Yeah.
But we're not willing to destroy neighborhoods in the process. And that's the way it is.
Okay.
So I'll just add, tangentially related, I went to the District 4 meeting over the weekend, had a really nice discussion with a pretty big group of attendees about all these issues. And I would just encourage all of us to go around wherever we can, have conversation, because I think, and I also encourage them to talk to counselors and just have conversations around town. So I feel like the more it's discussed, the better chance we have of actually getting things discussed appropriately at council meeting, and hopefully.
Good.
So in the interest of time, I think we should move on, because we don't have anything to do with footnote M right now. Next up, we had discussion of the ADU regulations. Nate, you sent us the latest draft. I assume that's what it is, right?
Yeah, it was, with some comments that from the other week, and yeah, I mean, I think it's a work in progress. I forgot if I forwarded it around. I thought I was going to. The
Yeah.
state is holding a webinar for model ADU ordinance, bylaw they're calling it, and so I think it's like 2 weeks. But the idea is that we discuss this at the planning board next week, and again probably on March 19th, and try to have something ready to send to the state for their review. And so,
Okay.
it's really having a
is-
definition and then some standards and conditions.
So Nate, this is the February 12th version.
Yeah, I think it still has that data on it.
Yeah, I think it still
It's-
has in red the comments that.
It's
Bruce
still
drew
got
back
it's
out.
got red comments, particularly
Yes.
as you get into the staff comments and questions.
That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm
And
looking.
I was actually wondering, and this came up also, I think in our subcommittee, maybe a full board. Does it make more sense to just write a justification and ask the state directly along with this, or is it better to just sort of send this type of document? Do you understand what I'm asking? Should we be more direct? Is there any benefit in that?
No, I think it'd be okay to be more direct and have some justification.
And how does that happen? Who makes that ask? Is that you, Nate? Is that town manager? Like how does that work?
I think it would be me. I think what we would do is we'd ask the planning board if it's ready on the 5th, try to work on it, or on the 19th, have the planning board vote that we send, this document or something similar to the state.
Okay.
And so
So I'd be happy to start drafting some justification language, obviously to be added to by you and then anyone else. I think Bruce, the table you're putting together is fantastic for that as well. Really to make the case that we may be somewhat unique in Massachusetts.
Yeah, I'll just say unique. Let's ditch the adjective.
Yeah, good idea. And
Yeah.
unique not in a special way, unique in a problematic way. So
Yes.
we need a different word just to have a
Well,
negative connotation rather than a positive.
I know the comments by our colleagues, our full board colleagues, suggested that we shouldn't. It wasn't a good look, was a
I
phrase,
really,
and it was special. And I think
that
that
really hurts my feelings.
quite the reverse. I
I totally
think
agree.
it is our obligation to
Yes, I
make
agree.
it clear that the town is different, and that this is an obligation that we have
That's why we're on these boards,
put
right?
that case.
Yeah.
And getting fussed up about whether it hasn't got a good look is
Yeah.
well,
Yeah. So so like my thought is
frustratingly
we're not asking
irritating.
for an exemption, sorry, from the regulations. We're justifying why we think we can have, these dozen conditions or whatever we're calling them.
So,
And
I
but
think
I guess
relief was
I was thinking both, like, can we present this, but then also raise the point that they have exempted other towns, right?
um,
wasn't relief the word that you used, which I thought was a good one.
yeah, I don't think they've exempted other towns. So, Boston's exempt from 40A, and so they're
No,
exempt
but
from this. But
I thought Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, and the Cape, this ADU by right was, they were
no, I, I,
exempted.
th after that, you mentioned that, Jesse, I looked and I couldn't find it. So I think what they really mean is most of their ADUs, I think, will be short-term rentals. And so they were able to get that piece in the legislation that short-term rentals can be regulated. And so I think that they think through that ability of limiting short-term rentals, then they're limiting the ADUs, but they're not exempt from the ADU legislation, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, well, we're not asking to be either.
Okay,
We're asking for
okay,
relief in the
right.
sense that we can put the owner occupancy requirement. I think that's my
Yeah.
understanding of
Okay,
where we
so,
are.
but again, maybe it can be used as part of the justification, whatever. I'll try and
Yeah.
write
Yeah.
that in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not that they're exempt, but that there was some kind of exception made basically for extenuating town circumstances, which I think we definitely qualify. Right. Uh,
I think you
uh,
so Jones up on this. You'd be a perfect advocate to advocate
yeah,
to Nate, who's the official advocate.
yeah. Go ahead, Fred, and then Janet has her hand up. I'll let her chime in.
Yeah, I just wanted to observe that it's not actually an owner occupancy limitation. It's a student housing
Thank you.
maximum, which is different.
Yeah,
Yes, it is.
yeah.
I wasn't disciplined enough in my speech.
I'm bringing Janet over. Jen, are you there? You still have your hand up?
Yeah, I have a quick question, I think, for Nate, is when I read the ADU state law, it seemed like, okay, you can't regulate this, you can't regulate that, but you can regulate other things. And then the regs came in and said, no restriction on uses. And I thought that language was crazy broad because when you look at the use table, it's huge amount of uses. And has there any, on my listserv, planners listserv, there's been no discussion of the broadness of that. And I was like, okay, so I can put a copper smelting, I can have an ADU and have a copper smelter. I could make it a transfer station. I could, take forestry products and sell them.
From your
I can open a
ADU.
medical practice. And so yeah, so
Okay.
it seems like the legislature was very clear with the limitations. And then the regulations, like say, you can't regulate these uses, any uses, and basically you're in a residential neighborhood, people live there. And so is there any conversation about the regs being way too broad?
I mean, I think, yeah, I think I think the way the building commissioner would interpret it is that, what's allowed in the zoning district is how, what could be possibly allowed. And if it's a special permit use, it would actually require a special permit, right? So, right, if you're trying to do a certain home occupation or something, then that would actually follow a permitting path. But I think, some of
So
it
it's
is,
not just opening the, yeah. So they're
yeah,
not
I mean,
opening the floodgates every use because the language was so broad. I just thought, I don't think they're thinking it through.
yeah, I think there's other places too where the regulations are inconsistent with how things would be interpreted, even defining gross floor area. and they reference some building code, but then they throw in other terms. And so again, I think that's going to be an interpretation question that probably communities might do differently. And then it becomes a legal, there might be legal cases that then have to get heard and help defined through legal precedents. It's an odd way to go. And yeah, so I think when there was the public hearing on the rules and regs a few weeks ago, there was a lot of comments. And I think there's still a lot of questions that communities may not be posting on the listserv, but what I know Rob, as a building commissioner, he's talked to other building commissioners, and there's a number of questions about what they think are, if not inconsistencies, different interpretations you can have between the rules and regs and the legislation. And so some communities might be doing things slightly different than others. And, I can't say they're wrong until a court says that. But I agree. If you read that language and you say there can't be any types of these restrictions, and you almost can't, it's almost like, okay, yeah, you can allow anything and you can't impose any conditions. I'm not sure that's exactly what it means, but
Okay.
So Nate, what did you want from us on this front today?
yeah, I think if there's just other questions or comments or, ideas,
Mhm.
and
And
I think some of the comments that were provided were good. And I think some of it will help if we have context, if we send this to the state. So for instance, like regulating appearance, could be in conflict, and we can say, well, how, and the comment is it in conflict if we're asking the ADU to be aligned with the primary dwelling? And, and I think we can include that and say, have kind of a justification for almost every
Sure.
condition we propose. And I think, and so you can always send that to me after too, but I just, just if there's other ideas or thoughts,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I'm happy to go through it again and add some language, and you can pick and choose, what you think best. You had also put, sub-bullet student home definition.
Right.
I assume it's the same issue there, that we just need to provide maybe more justification, more discussion about why we want to add that
Right.
also.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, Fred, I think had the way he described it today was nice, was good language. And so, there's, you can, right, whatever side of the coin you use to describe it. I think, if you get, it's like, right, Bruce was saying, like, instead of saying we're 40% permanent residents, if we say we're 60%, temporary residents, or however, they phrase it in the census, it's like, that's a different way to say it, and it
Yeah.
has more impact. Or
So maybe the three of us can commit to drafting, writing some sentences, whatever, each of these pieces, and sending those to Nate in the next few days to get incorporated into some kind of main justification document, rather than, because I think we're all in agreement in this group. I'm not sure we need much discussion about it right now, unless you two feel differently.
No, I think we're good.
Yeah, great. So let's then move on, and we'll talk about
Oh, what happened? There you are.
that was me. Other zoning areas for potential overlays. Hi, Karen. I guess it's 11:26. Karen Winter has joined the panel. I wanted to open this discussion. I had kind of a different idea than the way we've been approaching this, and it's really, I guess, a question for you, Nate, and others who've been involved longer than I have. So with the North Amherst in particular, and Bruce, I thought your sketch was excellent, really, really helpful. There's only a handful of properties we're talking about, right? And I was wondering if a first step that makes it more efficient is to talk to the owners and or their developers and try and bring them in as a group or a couple of them to discuss with us. What do you think would be attractive for you to consider, rather than us? It's, since it sounds like we're pretty open to things, to possibilities there as a group, why not try and solicit some information first rather than try and decide beforehand? Although Nate, maybe you've had some conversations already. I don't know. Again, I'm really wondering how this could work. Is there a way to have some back and forth before we try and draft something and start the long process of having it go through council and open meetings, hearings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I know one property manager periodically reaches out to the town, But when I looked yesterday, I was doing some looking. I actually have about 25 properties. It was probably a little bit bigger than just like the 3 or 4. There's some frontage lots with single family homes that I think would be included. And so yeah, I mean, I think having the discussion about is this a good area? And sometimes the owners they might think it's not a great idea, but what if a developer comes in, right, or a team comes in, they say, wow, this is, and then they might be able to work with the owner. Some owners might say, I don't want to do this at all, but what if someone else came out forward, a partner, and said, well, we'd love to partner with you, and then they changed their mind. But I was looking at the North Amherst one. I will say that, there's about 650 units in the area I was looking at, right, which is, like Meadow Street south and west of North Pleasant Street, north of, say, Presidential Apartments north, with exclusions here and there. But, it's 650 units. And if we, say if we, the consultant had previously said you have to have a pretty big increase in density, right? So say if we triple the density to 1,950 units, that's 13 North Squares, right? So think of the Mill District, the North Square, those 2 buildings.
Mhm.
And I did some math, and I have a map. It's like, roughly say 8 acres. You'd have, 13 8-acre developments to get to triple the density. And that is a lot. And I'm not sure, I think, and that's, inclusive of parking and, I want to be realistic that there will be parking, and that's,
Sure.
3 and 4 story buildings, not 5. But, it made me think like, wow, that's a lot of units. Like like, we could I think we should talk about it a little bit. And then, the staff could reach out to, there's a few developers too, and say like, is this even something that is, in addition to the owners, right? Like, is this
Right.
something that is worth considering?
And then the tail end of what I was suggesting could even be, again, I don't know if the town ever does this, is basically put some loose parameters in place and basically put out a request for proposals and send it to all of these owners and developers. Say, okay, the town's interested in doing this. Tell us what you think. And that way we still have total control over the approval process, right? I mean, it's not even approving anything. It's just like similar to what UMass is trying to do, right?
Right, right.
They're asking the developers what makes sense. What do you want to do? And that to me feels like a pretty good approach here as well. But yeah, and Nate, I like your idea of thinking about just the max possibilities, and maybe that's too much. Maybe we want to limit it in some way, et cetera, et cetera. Bruce, go ahead.
Nate, I'd like to see the bounded map that you put together. I put my bounded map together, recognizing that it could extend to the south, including Presidential and so forth. But I also had it going into the FPC zone that is the Schwartz Farm, which is another conversation. There's the you said something a moment ago that did you say 4 and 5, 3 and 4 stories, but not 5? My sense in the area that we're talking about, it would be nice to imagine that you could have 6 to 8 stories, but maybe only in portions, so that you would get a kind of a staggered massing. So thinking up language or mechanisms that would allow some higher portions of the buildings of massing that scaled down, and have something that was less blocky than we typically see. I mean, when we look downtown, of course, we see there's a height limit, and the whole footprint is built to the height limit because that's the economic driver. But I think if we could design an overlay that had a different structure that incentivized or allowed or enabled something that was more interestingly massed and had some quite tall pieces, because this can be fairly way back from established housing. So that's number 2. Number 3, I think, is I definitely think talking to Jesse, I agree with you. I think having conversations with the owners would be interesting and important, and particularly Sarah and Joe Schwartz, who I mean, they're certainly Sarah was one of the original town councillors, so she's plugged in a way to the community. They've been there for a very long time. Joe's a successful farm consultant these days, I understand. So I'm not sure what the farm is. I don't know where the family is, all these kind of things. And finding that out, how they feel about that. They may feel like the Jakanowski family did, who sold us being the North Amherst Community Farm, of which I'm the longtime board chair. The Jakanowski family accepted a considerably less amount of money in order for an organization that committed to maintaining the whole of the parcel as farm. And if the Schwartz adopt some philosophy like that, they would be interested in a very different outcome than if they were the Barkowski family, which is the neighboring farm to NACF, which went in a completely different direction. So I think it would be very important to have those kind of conversations with people who own or control parcels. So I think I'm up to 3. And number 4 is, Nate, do you imagine that, I don't know whether it affects how we would construct an overlay or not, but I kind of assumed that these parcels would be developed somewhat the way we're thinking a University Drive would be. In other words, the existing parcel boundary definition substantially would be the increments of development as opposed to large-scale aggregation. Now, that could be because University Drive is a strip and it's got wetland situations which are really disaggregating or making aggregation quite difficult. And some buildings have been, they're new and some are not. So but I'm not sure that those forces are the same. And so maybe my assumption that we would be dealing with these large parcels as independent development initiatives, or imagining that they would be independent development initiatives, maybe it's not true. And that would be another reason to test out the interests of not just the owners, but developers who, in town. But I don't know whether Barry Roberts and Archipelago and so forth, whether they have the horsepower to do 100-acre developments or not. But they certainly have the horsepower to do the fractions that we're talking about. So all of these conversations with owners, with particular developers and so forth, I think would be a starting point. But I'd also, circling back, like to see the map that you've drawn, Nate, so I can engage. I'm not sure. I mean, another conversation would be public meetings in the North Amherst community to see what the community feels about this. And that might be, the interest there might be more on how big or small is the bounded overlay proposal.
Yeah.
I think I better shut up.
Thanks, Bruce. I've been thinking pretty similarly as I've been driving by the last few weeks, that I could easily imagine some kind of, suggestions where the height increases as you get away from the street. Basically the same thing you said, Bruce. As you move towards 116, I could easily imagine 6+ stories over there. Probably not 20, but I feel like the space could accommodate that pretty easily and not be too overwhelming. But yeah, starting low and just increasing towards the west. Also, Nate, I guess it would be useful, might be savvy enough at this point to use our town JS to see about owner occupancy versus not, like all along Meadow Street there. I'm guessing a lot of those are rented, but I don't actually know. So that should be part of our conversation too, just to think about, where those pockets are of still owner occupied.
I think they are, Jesse. I drive down Meadow Street almost every day because it's my way to Northampton, and I've been building habitat houses there now for the past 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
So and over the years I've watched it drift. It's a logical place now for student housing, and also the other thing about Meadow Street is the streetscape has kind of been obliterated to a fair degree by townhouse. So you don't have a bounded streetscape by old houses. As you get down to the western end, you do, but that's a short strip of the whole.
Yeah.
So it's not a precious streetscape, I don't think. Not like 63 is, for example, that goes out from the library onto Pulpit Hill.
Or even Pine Street going the other direction is still pretty.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can share my screen. The Swartz Farm, Bruce, is, is permanently preserved agricultural land. So unless we're
Correct.
willing to do anything there, that's a big undertaking.
Well, no, it's not.
Well, to
It's
take it out of APR is a big deal.
it's in APR.
It is, yeah.
Oh, that was not evident from the data. I thought it was just farmland conservancy zoned.
No, it's
Oh,
in
if it's APR, I think we can forget about it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't know that.
Let's see. Let me share and see if is this map visible for everyone? I can make it a little bit bigger, I guess.
Yeah. Yes.
So
Yes.
I had stuck with Meadow Street. Came down. I included the back of these properties just
Yes, I noticed those. Yes, that makes sense.
and then included some single family or I'll say like small or frontage lots on North Pleasant
Yeah.
all the way down to the end of Presidential and then across to 116. And so I didn't exclude any of these. I think one is still maybe owner occupied, but it's a 3 unit. So there's an owner, but
Yeah.
most of um, these are all rental, these are condominium. So there are
Yeah.
some owners. I
Yeah.
think all the rest of these are all now non-owner occupied rentals.
Yes, I think so. When I was getting the areas of these units, I found that it was easy to get the areas of Brandywine and Puffton
Right.
because it's a single owner. But once I clicked on 5A 142, which is townhouse,
Yeah.
I got a single owner with a 0.14 size lot. So
Yeah.
I concluded that I don't know how you get areas of parcels that have condominiumized. I tried the same with our Pine
Right.
Street co-housing just to check, and I found out again that my house was listed, but none of the other 10 are. So
Yeah, it's actually I have to do a little legwork too. It's not our system
yeah,
doesn't, I can measure online, but when something's
okay,
condominiumized, it changes, right, how we record things. But
yeah.
my
Anyway,
other map I'll show is say these rectangles are 8 acres, which would accommodate, say, 150 units. What North
yeah,
Square would be if it wasn't mixed use, roughly, right? So, I
yeah,
mean, it's rudimentary, but it's just saying, okay, here's a dozen, and we need one more just to say triple the density, which is what
yeah,
consultants have said would be enough incentive for someone to do this because, the cost of taking down units and putting up and relocation
Yeah.
and everything. So,
And
yeah.
sorry, remind us, how high are the how high are those buildings?
North Square, so
Oh,
they're 4 stories. They're 3 and 4. They're taller because they have sloped roofs. But
in North Square, yes.
yeah,
Are you asking about? I thought you were asking about buildings within the bounded area, Jesse.
Oh, no, I was asking North Square. So I was
yeah,
just thinking,
Okay.
okay, if this is the area we have to triple the density, how high do we have to be?
right. So we
Right.
could do that with 4-story buildings.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Well,
if we
except that the Brandywine is already 3-story brick buildings. Townhouse are 2-story, and
yeah,
Puffton is essentially 1.5.
yeah, and so some of it would be yeah, interesting, Bruce, about your question of aggregation. It's like, right, right, the overlay would then have to be somewhat flexible to say, like, okay, if the owner of this property, Brandywine, right, were to say, okay, what I need triple my density, if they were to do it individually, what does that mean? Then it's a different look than, say, tripling it here or in this overlay as a, you know, generally,
Yeah.
right, as an aggregate. Um,
Yes.
so
And
I don't know. I do think some of these are big enough properties that it'd be a really big undertaking to do, combine a few. But I could see, like,
yeah,
you
I
know,
agree.
Oh, but doesn't any overlay, I mean, can't we build in some flexibility by special permit or whatever? And
yeah,
sort of put language in there that developers shouldn't be shy about coming to the planning board with other possibilities, right?
yeah, and as an overlay, I don't know if I'd want a special permit, but I mean, I think we could set enough conditions or things. So, for instance, right, if we were
Yeah,
like,
sorry, I didn't mean for the whole overlay. I mean, in case someone has a different idea, like
yeah,
aggregating, whatever.
Provisions for a supplementary possibility, I think
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Jesse's saying.
yeah, I mean, we could even within this overlay, we could do things like, in here you're limited to 4 floors, and here you have you could be 7 here,
exactly.
you're 5 here, you're 4, and and we could, you so we could set those kind of conditions, and um,
Yes,
Yep.
or if we could draft some language that allowed uh, even greater flexibility based on, I don't know, distance from the boundary or,
right,
Distance from streets or boundary
yeah,
or
yeah,
yeah.
family houses or whatever,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I
yeah,
think
and so
that's a great idea.
yeah, and so I don't, there are wetlands and there's other pieces. A lot of this would be redevelopment. There's a water body here and some surface drainage. So I think there, are some complications, but yeah, to me it would be, I was also thinking like, do we require affordable units, or is this different? Do we, what are some of the other conditions? Are we flexible in parking? So, at North Square, in my rectangles here, I was, you know, considering that there'd be a fair amount of surface parking, you know, just because I think most people will probably still want to have at least a Cara unit. But
Maybe
Yeah.
talk about those 2 points for a minute. On the affordable housing, you, some of you certainly know better than I do. Remind me the requirements to qualify, like can students? I think they cannot, right?
they cannot, right?
So then
They can, they can, but very difficult to do
yeah,
it.
I mean, my thought
Sorry,
on that,
I didn't hear the question, Jesse. Sorry.
can students be approved for affordable units?
Oh, I see.
Because I know there's a big, desire from students for affordable housing too,
Right.
but it's a different animal. And so
Mhm.
my thought on that for this scale of density would be to maybe not require affordable.
Well, it's affordable usually. Well, maybe it's not. I was going to say affordable is usually when you buy, but it isn't. It's only in my experience, I guess. You've got Section 8 vouchers and things like that, I suppose, for rental affordability. Is that right, Nate? And so then you'd have to be a student who would be signing up for Section 8 vouchers. And when you're only there for a short period, it's probably going to take that long to get the voucher. Is that true? Is that why it's not feasible for
That's
short-term
a good point.
rentals to be
And
set up affordably?
and I think they're considered dependents of their parents. So in terms of their income, it's different.
Yeah.
When I
Yeah.
was thinking affordability, I meant, the inclusionary zoning, right? So
Right.
if we had a development that's 300 units, 12% would be required to be affordable. Do we
Yeah.
waive or change our inclusionary requirements in the overlay? I mean, there could be
Yeah,
a different.
I'd be inclined to figure out how to maybe waive that for these. I mean, that's just my thought. Or,
I might be inclined to try and figure out that they could be, with the farmland development overlay, for example, we asked that the development be put on the prime agricultural land. The zone has a mechanism that says where on the site should you do the development. Maybe we could do something that says where on the site the inclusionary fraction of the housing should be, which would be closer to the bus stops or closer to the perimeter of the development, for example, because I mean it's a good opportunity to create affordable housing, and if we think we're incentivizing it enough that the development process can support it, then I think we should try
yeah,
to
yeah,
we should make the effort to make it happen, and then think about how it can be located suitably and whatever.
I could certainly be convinced otherwise if we think it's not going to be prohibiting for developers to want to approach this. But maybe
Yeah.
I understood. Karen and then Janet.
Just briefly, Nate, you once threw out, should we consider a really high rise building someplace? And I'm just wondering, is that something that is incentivizing for developers? If we have one building that's high, can they, for example, do underground parking and have a park around it and have something like that considered also? Have we ever thought about that?
Yeah, I guess I didn't mean like a high rise. I guess what I've heard is that at 7 floors is when there's efficiencies between building code and expensive building and building methods. And so, at like 3, 4, and 5 stories, the cost of putting in elevators and all these other things isn't offset. But once you get to 7 stories or higher, there's, I think the code synchronized better and the cost of construction makes more sense. So I don't know. I'm not proposing a high rise, and I don't know when I since we've talked about this, I've gone through, driven by more, and I'm like, I think 7 floors is tall. I'm not saying like anything bigger. It just, that's what we've heard, right? That's what a number of developers and others have said, that 7 floors is where everything gets to be the most efficient in terms of meeting all the standards and codes and everything. But yeah, if you had 7 floors, could you do something different? I mean, I don't know what, does it have to all be residential to be efficient, or could you have parking on some of those floors too, or do something? But yeah.
Janet, go ahead. I think you're muted. I don't know if you're talking.
Thank you. So I would urge you not to drop the affordable housing requirement, the inclusionary zoning one, because if you're adding 1,000 or 2,000 units, that's going to kill our 10% or 11% that we're at. And all of a sudden we'll have unfriendly, I can't remember if they're 40Bs or 40Rs. And so, it's just going to force the town to build more and more inclusionary housing. And, part of the point of the inclusionary zoning is like, you're making a lot of money off of student housing, provide some housing for families and affordable units. So I would really urge you not to drop that requirement. And also it'd be just an odd precedent and everyone's going to push for it. The other thing is if I don't think Nate was talking about this, or Jesse, I can't remember, or Bruce, but a lot of the current affordable housing that we have inside, student apartments isn't that much fun for families. And so I think you could have, if you had a large building or a complex being built, you could say the families can be over in this corner, a little more segregated in a positive way from the student activities. And so I think that's something to keep in mind. The other thing is when you're talking about the Mill District, it's the building, I think that a lot of the neighbors thought the building was too big, but the architecture fits, right? And so when you're looking at the street, when you're driving around, it's just a lot of New England style houses along the street. And that's a nice feeling. And there's some historic buildings. And so I would think in terms of design standards, can you make buildings that fit, that clapboard siding, peaked roofs and all that kind of stuff, or something that references it in a way that feels like it fits in. And because I think probably the people living around there, it seemed if they just become these big modern boxes that we're housing students in, I think we sort of lost the war. And I think this housing is so lucrative that we can kind of say, let's make it fit in and make that the challenge for the designers. Instead of having boxes with the same windows with no ornamentation, kind of thing. So that would be, I would encourage to do the North Square Mill District kind of treatment, saying you're in New England, and so try to fit in. I don't know if you can keep doing that when it gets bigger and bigger. I'll leave that to better people, better minds. But I don't think we just want to see a bunch of concrete buildings around and, without sort of more exciting architecture. So that's it. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Janet. Bruce, go ahead.
I'm going to refute Janet's proposition. Secondly, not the piece about inclusionary housing, couldn't agree more, and her arguments are actually quite enlightened. I hadn't even thought of it from those points of view. But first of all, I just thought from the point of view of housing, parking, Karen's thought was that we could have higher buildings and so forth. And I think where the density is, particularly if it turns out that we're doing these parcel by parcel, I think the kind of remedy that I think is part of the overlay at University Drive, where parking accommodations or arrangements we encourage to be cross boundary agreements and so forth, so that that might make it possible. Just if you feel that you've got a bigger parking requirement and you want that, then your parcel can accommodate. Let's encourage people to think in terms of solving their problem in collaboration with their neighbors, perhaps. I don't know whether that's I don't like North Square particularly. I don't think it's a good model to say we should because I don't think it achieves what Janet's talking about. the kind of language, or not the language, but the sentiments that Janet's expressing, I kind of understand, but I don't agree with them. The sense is that we should try and make everything look New Englandy. And I think that the addition that Kuhn Riddle put on the back of the white church in the center of town, I call it the Peter Pan Church, because that's where the Peter Pan bus used to stop. But it's a really elegant addition. It's completely modern looking. It has not at all the materiality of New England houses. It's the antithesis of what has been done at the Mill District. And it's elegant and interesting. And I think it's a much better example of a thoughtful modern design. The Mill District has a very little amount of architectural intelligence applied to it, in my view. It's a mess. And I think we can do better. I know we can do better. I mean, you just have to spend more on design. So I think we should relax a little bit and not try and direct people in the way Janet's language was suggesting, because that is going to guarantee a rather suboptimal, dreary, and oppressively unsophisticated design solutions.
Go ahead, Karen. I think you're muted.
I didn't know you called on me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking of where would I like to live? And I remember when I was, this was in Munich, Germany, they put up in the park this high-rise building. The apartments were kind of inexpensive. There were a lot of young couples there with babies. And the parking was underground, and there was enough land around to make a communal space where people could gather. It was wonderful. And I agree, we have to sort of be open. How are we going to achieve an environment? And I agree with Bruce, the Mill District kind of makes me shudder. It's, to me, a cookie cutter New England sort of model. And would I like to live there? No way, I wouldn't. So I do think we have to be open, and I like your idea, Jesse, of talking, and I don't know how we go about this, opening ourselves to developers and see what can they propose, which is going to make financial sense for them, and that would be really desirable, so that maybe Henning and I, when we're sick of this big house, we would want to live there. We need that kind of housing too. We shouldn't just be considering students here. That's got to be a little bit flexible and attract all the people that need a place in town, that, can't move here and want something smaller and more affordable too. And that doesn't necessarily mean some little townhouse.
Yeah, I mean, in principle, I don't disagree with anything you just said, Karen. I think I do wonder about the attractiveness. Let's imagine these all get developed. Everything in North Amherst we're talking about, and it's, what numbers did we just say? There's 2,000 students living there now. Would a young couple, new family, young professional would that be an attractive place to go live if there were options? I don't know, maybe. Part of me thinks not so much. And part of me thinks one goal in my mind is what we're trying to do is try and encourage and not designate student places, but encourage maximum density in certain places, again, to alleviate the pressure in other spots in town where those people might have opportunities. And again, I don't know how exactly to accomplish that, but I think something to consider. Bruce, go ahead.
What you're saying, Jesse, occurs to me that typically when we have affordable units, as we just saw when we were looking at U Drive Amity with Barry Roberts et al., was that the affordable units were distributed through the property. And in fact, there was such an effort to make it equally, or comparable was the word, I think, in the language of the Article 15. But in this instance, our overlay, so far as inclusionary affordable units are concerned, might want to go in the exact reverse route, that we might want to cluster. We would probably use cluster or aggregate rather than ghettoize. But you know, this unit depends on how it goes. But let's say the Puffton Village cluster were to go in one go, in the way that Nate was describing. Let's say, I think we might be able to do the math. Do you know how many units are in Puffton right now, Nate?
Yeah, there's 106.
106. Let's round it to 100. And because it's only 1.5 stories, let's say it creates 400 units, just because we can say that. And so we're talking a 12% of, that's close to 50.
Yep.
That's a community.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
my point. That's a
Yep.
community. So if they are put in a place, even if it was a couple of places, you've got two groups of 25 or 20 plus. That's an ideal community, so far as co-housing theory is concerned. And so that might be the way in which we would try to construct our overlay wording, such that the affordable units were clustered
Yeah.
in community sizes.
I could very much see that happening, especially if we could build in language of, well, closer to the street, whatever boundary we're
Yeah.
talking about, can only be 2 or 3 stories, and that's where you should put affordable housing and family-oriented housing. And then as
Yeah.
you go back, you can get into 7, 8 story,
You know, another thing that could happen, because this is how the first co-housing communities happened, the very first one in California, in Davis, the whole of the affordable fraction of the community was given over to a co-housing group, and they not only occupied it, they also developed it. And that might be a very attractive proposition. In order to do this, you can say, encourage, and this would be an encouragement, but so that they enable an independent nonprofit developer to maybe take over the development of the affordable fraction. If I'm remembering what Laura from Valley CDC was saying the other night at that forum, she probably wouldn't say no. It costs a fortune to develop affordable housing, and we should make sure that the developer does it. But there might be some collaboration if it was in an aggregated community where somebody might say, this is an opportunity, and I'd like to be, there might be some third-party collaboration. So it's because of the scale of the project and the scale of the generated affordable components, we should recognize that it gives us some additional opportunities.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you for that. Changing my thinking for sure. Janet, go ahead. You're muted.
So I'd like to agree with Bruce in that, in terms of the buildings he pointed out that Amherst College did. And I don't know how, but I feel like the boards, the boards get presented with projects and rubber stamp them, basically saying, okay, it's, whatever. The only building I think that has been sort of changed dramatically was the Spring Street building, because the design review board said, like, wow, this is really, like, you need to do this and that and the other thing. And so, oh my God, here come the dogs. Hang on. Sorry. It's really a small dog.
Sounds dangerous.
Yes. She's like 30 pounds of fury. But I was gonna say, if the design standard was like, does Bruce approve of it? I would agree. And I just feel like if a bunch of faceless, modern, boxy buildings get put into that area, we sort of lost the war. And so I don't know how you do a design standard, just saying make a cool, interesting, modern building or something that fits into New England better. And New England isn't like, there's plenty of great buildings you can point to that are more modern. I just don't think they've been being built in Amherst, and I don't know how you do that. So I would kind of push this group to say, what do you want to see there, and put the regs towards it. Do you know what I mean? How do you say Amherst College is just, as we know, rolling with money, and they hire really interesting architects and they do good stuff. Like, do you know what I mean? How do you get
Yeah,
there?
but why can't we do, I mean, similar to the way Wayfinder's design went, right? They brought something, the planning board
Exactly.
really gave a lot of negative feedback and they came back with something better, right? I mean, it can be the same process to get there, I'm assuming.
Yeah, but the same, that process also led to a series of buildings that most of us would not be in love with, or towns.
Right, so it depends on planning board, I guess, right? Or whoever's gonna do the site plan review or they review the initial designs to speak up.
Yeah, we've got to trust the process, at least to some degree.
I mean, I agree, we can put in some, and should put in some loose standards maybe, but not be too prescriptive. Nate, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think it's a good question and you know, kind of a, I think it's really difficult to answer. You know, Dotson, I think, is finding this with the downtown that they, through their forums and what they've presented, you know, in terms of say like aggregating parcels and what it looks like, they, when they had some foam models and people put them around, there were some really nice ideas for what could happen, you know, around Prey Street and west of Kendrick Park, but that would involve, you know, erasing the property boundaries and coming up with what to me would be like a really planned development, right? That you're pretty prescriptive to get something that would look the way you might want it in terms of building style, size, architecture, um, which may work actually downtown, right? But in this overlay, I don't know if we did that. I mean, you know, I'm envisioning that aggregating some parcels makes the most sense, and you'd have some new streets, and you'd have, you know, you'd want to have open space and nice, you know, walkability and you know, but it's hard to in zoning to allow flexibility, say by site plan review, because it's essentially it's a by right use, and then you know say, oh sure, but you can do this, but you know we really can't deny it, and so the board can talk a lot about it, but and so yeah, I think I don't know, I guess I'd have to give a little bit more thought about what, you know, what is the right process. So even if Jesse, you did what you said, kind of we put out like a request for interest, and we um, you know, we kind of did that with the East Street School, and some developers like that because it showed what could be done. You know, Cunard had done like this concept, but then others said, well, we want to do our own thing. So we wouldn't take someone else's concept design and then build it. But it's almost like if we did that for this overlay and we came up with like the concept that everyone liked, it would be then like, okay, you know, this is what we want, right? Like as opposed to someone coming in and doing a site plan that we would doesn't think work very well, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm yeah, I'm starting to think a little bit more about it, and the scale is big. The scale is big too. So I want to make sure we get it right. If we think triple the density or triple the units is good, you know, it's 2,000 units. Say it's a lot of units.
Yeah,
I think that's what we need though. You know, I think it goes back to the footnote M discussion. You know, you know I don't think we're gonna, you know, create new, you know, a new road between Lincoln and Sunset, right? And have these infill neighborhoods, and you know the way the town was developed, we're not on a grid and we're not on these really uniform lots, and so I want to be really careful in terms of right what kind of density we allow in certain places in town, because it really will change kind of the physical and the, you know, the kind of the whole community sense in those spaces. And so, you know, I think where we're looking at North Amherst, I think there is some opportunity, right? But I
agreed.
haven't, yeah, I'm still, you know, 7 stories seems like a lot. um I think Mill District, they're big buildings. You know, the idea was they're trying to break down the architecture, but when you see them, they're still big.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Janet, is your hand still up? If so, go ahead. Nope, okay. Yeah, I generally agree about the Mill District, but I think it's a much different intent there too, because of the mixed use, right? So, but anyway, that's separate discussion. Go ahead,
Nate,
Karen.
sorry, quickly.
Is Mill District successful? Are they rented out?
So
Is
so
it?
my basis for the Mill District was that if you take, you know, those two buildings and the parking, say, and that creates an 8 acre parcel or 8 acre site, and it's about 150 units, right? Right now it's not, but if you take out the mixed use, it's about 150 units. And so that was just a reference point. Like, here's what, here's what's done. And, so it takes, it's about 20 units an acre, right? 19 units an acre. So if we wanted to triple the density in this North Amherst area, essentially it's the same kind of development as the Mill District, just in terms of kind of numbers and density. I'm not, saying anything about the mixed use or the architecture. It's just kind of the size and massing and scale. What I've heard is that they've had trouble filling some of the commercial spaces, but to me, that's not, it could be that if there's more residents, then then they wouldn't, right? But
Right.
it's kind of just to me, it's more of a visual. Okay, that's what, if you look at the Mill District, you see those buildings, 150 units, see the parking around it. Imagine 13 of those is what would triple the density in this overlay. So that's just kind of the way I was looking at it as one
Yeah.
kind of model.
Although potentially we're not seeing it if it's sort of just, low to high, as we've been discussing.
Right.
It's not very in your face at all. It could be really tucked away.
No, some of it you probably wouldn't see at all, really, but yeah.
All right, sorry, I've got to go. I have limited time today. I guess you three could continue if you want, or we can. I thought this was a great discussion. If not, we'll close unless there's any other announcements or anything anyone needs to say.
No,
Karen?
How can we move ahead with talking to developers, and how can we move ahead?
Yeah, I think this will be brought up at the planning board in the next few meetings. And I think, you can always provide comments to me, to staff, and the idea would be I'm gonna send around some documents for the planning board meeting next week, and hopefully we, get some information. And then at some point, I think staff can reach out to different individuals and see how it, but I think I'd want to spend a little bit more time on kind of the parameters and ideas for this area.
Bruce?
Jesse, I just wanted to say to Nate that I thought that his boundary was a very good start, and if we all feel that, we could tell Nate that. And
Yes.
one of the products of this committee meeting could be that we support a recommendation to our the whole board that Nate's boundary is the basis for our project, shall we say?
Yep, I totally agree. We could maybe have a vote on that, unless you want to talk about it.
Yeah, we're all good with it, it seems. I'm
Yeah.
seeing Karen nodding.
Someone want to make a motion?
Or it could be an agreement by consensus if you want.
Okay.
I'm fine.
Yes,
Okay,
I thought it was
agreement by
just
consent.
useful feedback to Nate, because I had started by being querulous, and I had put my thing together differently. But clearly with the data about the APR on the Schwartz parcel, plus Nate's explanation of why he did what he did, in every respect, it seemed to make sense to me. So I think that was a good step forward for this meeting.
Okay, great. I will see you guys Wednesday at planning board, and then we are scheduled to meet the following Wednesday evening at 7 as well as subcommittee. I will email everyone a reminder.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks all. Have a
Bye.
good day. Bye.
Thank you.